Hi everyone, tonight we're going to stand absolutely frozen in our own hallway because sometimes the past doesn't knock. It just walks in like it still owns the place. I mean, that literally. You probably won't survive the kind of quiet explosion that happens when your family who disowned you a decade ago accidentally rents your house for their family reunion and then stares at you like you're the one who doesn't belong. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And if you're feeling brave, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is right now. It's always midnight somewhere. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. The floor under my bare feet was cool, polished maple, familiar, mine, and yet somehow I felt like the intruder. I stood motionless in the hallway, the hem of my linen robe brushing my knees, while the voices I hadn't heard in 10 years rose and fell in the living room just beyond the archway. Laughter, ice cubes clinking, my mother's unmistakable drawl pronouncing something like a humble coastal rental. Humble, she'd called it. The house appraised at $6.4 million. A door creaked, footsteps approached, and then they were there. My father stepped into view first. Harold Walker, tall, silver hair, still impeccable, wearing loafers on a beach vacation, because of course he was. His eyes scanned the space before landing on me. He blinked. Once. Twice. "Stephanie," he said, almost a cough of disbelief. Behind him, my mother appeared, Eleanor Walker. Her mouth opened to form some perfect greeting, but it never came. Her designer purse slipped from her shoulder and landed with a dull thud on the tile. She didn't bend to pick it up. I didn't move. My body refused. It's funny how fight or flight forgets to include freeze, but that's always been my specialty. James, my older brother, shuffled in behind them, holding the hand of a young boy I recognized only from social media. His eyes widened. Amanda was last trailing her husband, arm locked into his, like a well-trained ballroom pair. She saw me and froze, her mouth curling like she'd bitten into something too sour for words. "I'm sorry," my father said, finally, as if he'd stepped into the wrong Airbnb. "You're in the right house," I said, voice low even. "You just didn't know who it belonged to." There are moments in life where your whole nervous system lights up like a Christmas tree. This was one. I could smell my mother's perfume, a sharp floral designed to cover discomfort. I could hear a child calling for juice in the background. Somewhere outside, a seagull screamed. "Wait!" Amanda said. "This is your house." I nodded. "Yes. You rented it through Hampton Luxury Estates. They manage the place when I travel." Nobody moved. The silence wasn't just awkward, it was historical. 10 years ago, I'd walked away from these people with $800 a Canon EOS 5D and a stubborn refusal to settle for the life they'd picked for me. They told me I was being foolish, that I'd come crawling back. They didn't say I was dead to them, but the silence afterward did. And now, 10 years later, they'd walked straight into the home that silence built. "Well," James muttered, "this is something." That's one way to put it. I didn't yell. I didn't ask them to leave. I didn't even raise my voice. Maybe because part of me had rehearsed this scene so many times it no longer held heat. Only clarity. "I hope the property has been satisfactory so far," I said, finally brushing past them toward the kitchen island. "I see someone already adjusted the flower arrangements." My mother blinked. "You saw that. Security cameras, all legal. All standard for a high-end property." Of course I'd seen it. "You rearranged the hydrangeas," I added. "Nice touch." She flushed. Subtly, like the red you get from biting a chili too hard and pretending you're fine. James's kids wandered in talking about the bunk beds upstairs. One of them looked at me and said, "Are you the housekeeper?" I let out a small laugh. Not mean, just honest. "No, sweetheart, I'm the owner." In hindsight, I should have felt vindicated, but what I felt instead was slightly ridiculous. Like I was playing house in a life I'd built to prove a point, only now the point was, what exactly? Success independence, a quieter kind of revenge. A small off-topic fact, seahorses mate for life, but the male is the one who gets pregnant. If that isn't a metaphor for this whole situation, I don't know what is. Eventually, the kids ran off. Amanda dragged her husband outside under the guise of getting the beach chairs, and my mother finally picked up her purse. "I assume you'll want us to leave," she said, her voice steely as ever. "You paid," I replied. "It's non-refundable. Stay, enjoy, just stay out of my studio." "Your studio," James echoed. "Guest house," I said. "Converted it a few years back. It's where I work now." My father cleared his throat. "This isn't how we wanted to reconnect." I smiled a small, tight-lipped smile that photographers use when they're stalling for light. But here we are. There's a term in psychology, ambiguous loss. It's when you grieve someone who's still alive, when the absence is not about death, but about disconnection. That's what it felt like watching them wander through my house, sipping wine, setting up family photos on my console table photos from which I had been erased. No one mentioned me, except one voice, young, honest. "Whatever happened to Stephanie?" my cousin Zoe asked at dinner that night, her voice muffled through the speaker on my phone. "She used to take the best pictures." Silence. Forks paused. Water glasses stopped mid-air. "That's not an appropriate dinner topic," my mother snapped. "They said you made your choice," Zoe had muttered. I poured myself a glass of wine that night and stood barefoot on the deck, staring out over the moonlit ocean. The water doesn't judge. It just receives. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow, I'd reclaim this story. The thing about being the middle child, especially in a family like the Walkers, is that you learn to observe more than you speak. You're positioned between expectation and exhaustion. One child to exceed another, to protect, the achiever above the delicate flower below. You're the bridge, or the buffer, often both. Growing up, I was the unofficial photographer of all things Walker. James always camera ready in his debate team blazer. Amanda, the darling of cotillion and coordinated brunch outfits. And me, I was the one behind the lens. Invisible, unless the flash accidentally reflected in a mirror. People talk about childhood like it's this tender place. But let's be real, it's also a testing ground. I learned quickly that my job wasn't to shine. It was to keep quiet, to not spill red punch on the restoration hardware rug, and to nod when someone said, "You'll grow into your looks." My father, Harold, was a man who ran commercial real estate deals with the precision of a military campaign, strategy, power ties, a handshake that felt like a contract. And my mother, Eleanor Miss Southern Grace herself, curated every room, every social interaction like it was a magazine layout. She didn't mother, she maintained. They weren't cruel, they were just intentional. Their love, like everything else, was earned through performance, and I was not performing the right script. Old age wisdom, fact of the day, the average person doesn't realise they've experienced emotional neglect until their mid-30s. It's not the screaming that sticks with you, it's the silence, the absence, the way nobody looked up when you entered a room, unless you tripped over the dog. At 7, I got my first camera, not a fancy one. Just one of those chunky plastic disposables from the pharmacy. My grandmother gave it to me during a trip to Cape Cod. "Capture the world, baby girl," she'd whispered, slipping it into my hand like a secret. "You've got an eye." I used the whole roll on that trip, light hitting the water, the folds in beach towels, a woman reading alone with her sunglasses askew. Back home, I begged my parents to develop the film. My mother winced when she saw the photos. "These are artsy," she said. "But sweetie, next time maybe point it at people, not napkins." But I didn't want to photograph people. I wanted to photograph moments, the quiet in-between things, the way light curved around the edge of a teacup, the crooked candlestick after a dinner party. By middle school, I carried a camera everywhere. At birthday parties, school dances, even Amanda's piano recitals, though I usually wasn't allowed in the first 2 rows. Family section, my mother had said. I nodded and walked to the back. Quirky fact, no one asks for flamingos can only eat with their heads upside down, just like some families can only love you when you're looking the wrong way. By 15, I was bartering babysitting hours for photography books from used shops. I taught myself shutter speed, aperture, ISO. If math was my father's language, then camera settings were my dialect. He never noticed. I think you've always had a head for numbers, he told me. Junior year over dry-aged steak. Ever considered finance or consulting? I like business. I lied just enough to keep the peace. It's practical. The academic debate I fought in silence. Does creativity have to be practical to be permitted? The answer in my house was yes. So I did what a good walker does. I compromised. I applied to NYU's business school. My parents were thrilled. It was a name they could tell people. A brand. Our Stephanie is going into marketing, my mother told her bridge group. She has such an eye for detail. She didn't know how right she was. But I had a secret. 2, actually. The first was that I also enrolled in photography electives, slipping away from business classes to study lighting and composition. The second was the studio hidden in the corner of my dorm room, 3 clamp lights, a makeshift backdrop, and a used DSLR I'd bought with birthday money. Those years were a double life. Business lectures by day, art buildings by night. James thought it was funny. Amanda didn't care. My parents completely in the dark until graduation. That night at Le Bernardin. Yes, that Le Bernardin was supposed to be the celebration. Suits, heels, champagne. I wore a tailored black dress and carried the internship offer they'd helped me secure. Patterson and Hughes, top advertising firm. Everything was perfect. And then I ruined it. Over appetizers, I said the words I had rehearsed for months. I've decided to pursue photography professionally. My father blinked. I've been accepted into a mentorship program, I added. Silence. You know the kind that curdles the air and makes the waiter avoid your table for the rest of the night. You're starting at Patterson and Hughes next month, my father said, not asking. I'm not, I said, with my back straight and voice trembling. I declined. My mother didn't argue. She didn't even frown. She just folded her napkin as if that act alone might erase the moment. And then came the verdict. A conversation I would relive in dreams. Photography was beneath our name. Too unstable, too emotional. We didn't raise you to be a starving artist, my father said. If you walk away from this, my mother added, you walk away from everything. And I did. 2 days later, I packed my Honda Civic with camera gear and the remains of my graduation money, $800 to be exact, and I drove to Brooklyn. No map, no job, no safety net, just a lens, a stubborn heart, and the memory of my grandmother whispering, "Capture the world, baby girl." I've been capturing it ever since. The first night I spent in New York was in a hostel that smelled like mildew and desperation. I shared a bunk bed with a girl who wore glittery eyeshadow to sleep and insisted on FaceTiming her boyfriend at 3 a.m. in whispers that were somehow louder than yelling. Welcome to freedom. I found a room the next day, a Craigslist special in Bushwick with 3 roommates, one of whom thought deodorant was a government conspiracy. My window faced a brick wall and the radiator hissed like it had secrets, but it was mine, and I was free. Terrified, broke, invisible, but free. With $800 and rent due in 10 days, I picked up 2 jobs barista by morning, waitress by night. I walked everywhere to save subway fare, subsisted on rice and eggs, and used my tip money to buy second-hand lenses online. Every hour I wasn't pouring coffee or refilling ketchup was spent building my portfolio. I took photos of anything I could, headshots for struggling actors, graduation portraits in Central Park, product shots for Etsy shops that paid me in bracelets and scented candles, I even shot dating profile pictures for men who thought smouldering meant looking constipated. Sometimes I cried in the walk-in freezer between lunch rushes. Sometimes I didn't cry at all, just sat in the silence and wondered if my parents were right. Maybe I was being foolish. Maybe I should have just played the part, smiled at the right parties, married some hedge fund guy with good hair and generational wealth. But then I'd look through my lens, see a sliver of morning light across an empty subway platform, and remember this was mine. Old age wisdom for tonight. People overestimate what they can do in a year, but underestimate what they can do in 10. You don't need a miracle. You need a Tuesday night and stubborn lungs. Around Thanksgiving, I called home. No answer. I left a message. Hi. It's me. I just wanted to say happy holidays. Silence. I called again on New Year's, then my birthday, then Easter. Eventually, I stopped calling. James texted now and then. Happy birthday. Hope you're well. Once he met me for coffee wearing a tailored coat and looking over his shoulder like being seen with me might cost him his firm's approval rating. They just need time, he said, not meeting my eyes. He meant well, but the truth was time only heals what people are willing to face. My family, they weren't facing anything. Amanda never reached out. When she had her first child, I found out through an acquaintance's tagged photo. She and her husband wore matching outfits. My name wasn't in the captions or the comments. When my grandmother passed, I learned about it through an online obituary. There was a list of surviving family members. I wasn't on it. That one hurt more than I expected. It was like being erased from my own story. There's an overtly academic term for it, narrative exclusion. It's the act of removing someone from shared memory to preserve an idealized version of the group. In other words, I became the stain they couldn't scrub out, so they just rewrote the wallpaper around me. But even stains tell stories, and mine wasn't over. My first big break came during what I call the Great Avocado Toast phase, when I was living on the edge of eviction, but could still name 10 ways to style a flat lay. A wedding photographer, Garrett Reynolds, put out an emergency call on a freelance board. His second shooter bailed last minute, 12-hour day, $100 cash. I showed up with 2 backup batteries, granola bars in my pocket, and my sleeves rolled up literally and metaphorically. You've done this before, he asked halfway through the reception. Nope, I said, but I learn fast. He didn't smile, but he didn't fire me either. By 2 a.m, we were wrapping cords in silence, my feet screaming inside shoes I couldn't afford. You want more gigs, he asked. Always. Then get better shoes. And just like that, I had a mentor. Garrett wasn't kind exactly, but he was fair. Gruff, meticulous, allergic to small talk. But he taught me the things school never could. How to read light in a storm. How to calm a bride's father when the DJ plays the wrong song. How to file contracts, follow up with invoices, and never, under any circumstances, discount your rate. Because someone says, but my cousin does photos for fun. He took me on as his second shooter at luxury weddings. I held reflectors, shot backup angles, learned how to sell a story in still frames. One day, between jobs, he flipped through my portfolio. You ever consider real estate? I blinked, like houses. Yep, year-round money. No one cries over centerpieces. You've got the eye for angles. Try it. So I did. Garrett connected me to a realtor friend, a modest listing in Queens. Small commission, but I treated it like a Vogue spread. Natural light, soft staging, crisp lines. The realtor was impressed, referred me to colleagues. And suddenly, I had a specialty. Real estate photography, not glamorous, but consistent, predictable, and oddly intimate. Homes tell stories too. You just have to listen to the empty rooms. Before I knew it, I was booking luxury properties, roof decks, penthouses, townhouses with spiral staircases that cost more than my student loans. I stopped waiting tables, moved into a one-bedroom with actual sunlight, launched a tiny brand, Coastal Vision Photography. I got business cards. I even said we when I talked about myself, because someday I knew it wouldn't just be me. I had no idea how right I was. One day, a shoot changed everything. A penthouse on the Upper East Side, $4.2 million. Glass walls, views that made grown men weep. The owner was there, a woman in her 60s, elegant but approachable. "You see angles others miss," she said, watching me work. "Habit," I replied. "I grew up invisible." She didn't laugh, but she didn't look away either. Her name was Lisa Montgomery, a self-made publishing mogul, a widow, childless, and apparently a sucker for symmetry. She hired me again, and again, and again. We became not friends exactly, but something adjacent. She trusted me, called me when she wanted her homes shot with soul. I knew the layout of her Aspen lodge better than I knew my own apartment. And then, one day, she got sick. She didn't say it outright, just started calling more often, asking me to photograph her favourite homes for a project. We travelled together, Aspen, San Francisco, and finally her favourite, the beach house in the Hamptons. The house with the curved staircase, the glass that caught light like it was made of honey, the one her kids apparently hated. They say it's too far. Too much upkeep, she'd said, pouring wine that cost more than my mattress. But I think you get it. I did. When she died 6 months later, I stood in the back at her funeral. No one knew who I was. They cried polite tears. The reception had shrimp towers. 3 weeks later, I got a call from her lawyer. "She left you something." I assumed it was a camera, a bracelet, a thank you note. It was a house, the house, along with a maintenance fund for 5 years and a letter that read, "Stephanie, you see beauty in things others miss. This house deserves someone who appreciates it. Make it your own and make it work for you." Reader, I did both. Turning the key in that front door for the first time felt like stepping into a dream someone else had built, only to find out it had your name on the deed. The house was silent, like it had been holding its breath. Whitewashed walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, that soft salt smell that clings to coastal air like nostalgia. I stood in the foyer for a solid 10 minutes, just listening, not for ghosts, though I wouldn't have minded company, but for the sound of it being real. It was mine. I didn't call anyone, didn't post about it, didn't even tell Garrett right away. I moved in with 2 duffel bags, a rolling suitcase, and my favourite lens wrapped in 3 layers of socks. I slept in the guest room for the first week, as if I needed permission to claim the master suite. Old habits die hard, especially the one that whispers, "This can't possibly belong to you." But slowly, I made it mine. I converted the guest house into a studio, cleaned out Lisa's curated antiques, and filled it with soft boxes, seamless paper rolls, and a very expensive espresso machine I absolutely didn't need, but emotionally deserved. I began offering exclusive photo sessions to the Hamptons elite people who didn't blink at a $5,000 session fee, but would absolutely sue if their left side looked puffy in a portrait. It grew from there. Real estate agents, boutique developers, interior designers who insisted on a vibe but couldn't define it beyond adjectives like coastal modern minimalism but warm. I gave them what they wanted and a little more. Within a year, Coastal Vision Photography was no longer just me and a website. I had 2 assistants, a booking manager, and a waiting list. By 28, I'd saved enough to buy a modest apartment in Manhattan, one with a dishwasher and a view that didn't involve pigeons mating on a fire escape. My work appeared in Architectural Digest, Elle Decor, Hamptons magazine. I was even featured in a write-up called The Eye Behind the East End's Most Coveted Listings. Quirky fact break, the blobfish looks the way it does only when brought to the surface. In deep water, it's compact composed and actually kind of elegant. People just judge it at the wrong depth. Same goes for women who refuse to shrink. I was financially stable, creatively fulfilled, not married, not heartbroken, Not anything but fine. I had a few relationships, sure, but something in me always held back, like I didn't quite believe anyone could love me without strings or scripts. And then, one morning, while sipping coffee and reviewing edits for a multi-million-dollar townhouse, I got the notification. Instagram, alt James Obing Walker 87 has posted for the first time in a while. I almost didn't click it. James's account was a carousel of perfect. Kids with seasonal allergies in coordinated sweaters, Amanda's children posing with pumpkins or passports, my parents looking like retirees from a pharmaceutical commercial. But something about that post, I tapped. The photo was simple. My parents, arms around each other, standing on a stretch of beach that made my chest tighten before I could explain why. And the caption, looking forward to our family reunion next month in the Hamptons. Mum and Dad's 40th anniversary deserves a special celebration. I stared at the photo. That was my beach. Not just a beach, not just a lookalike. My beach, private. Behind Lisa's house. Behind my house. I opened my booking dashboard. There it was, a reservation from Hampton Luxury Estates. 1 week. Paid in full. No names listed, standard procedure for high-end clients. The Walkers had unknowingly rented my home. At first I laughed. I mean, what are the odds? A decade of radio silence, and now they were headed straight into the belly of the house that exiled daughter built. Then I panicked. My first instinct, cancel the reservation, fly somewhere, Greece, Iceland, anywhere that wasn't 10 feet from the ghosts of Thanksgiving past. I called Angela, my property manager. They've paid in full, she said, clicking keys in the background. Non-refundable, and it would be unusual to cancel without cause. The cause is that they're my estranged family who disowned me and haven't spoken to me in 10 years. She paused. That's complicated. No kidding. If we cancel, they could dispute the charges, leave a bad review, even escalate legally. I thanked her and hung up. My heart was pounding, and I was holding my coffee mug like it had wronged me personally. I paced for hours. Should I leave town? Should I let them enjoy their humble reunion, none the wiser? Then I saw my mother's Facebook post. Yes, Eleanor still used Facebook, infrequently, with curated captions that could double as lifestyle magazine pull quotes. Her latest post. Looking forward to our humble family gathering in the Hamptons. Nothing extravagant, just quality time with the people who matter most. And that was it. The people who matter most. It wasn't anger I felt, not even grief, just a cold clarity, a quiet decision rising from a decade of restraint. I wasn't going anywhere, not this time. I upgraded the security system, installed cameras in public areas, living room, kitchen, exterior deck. Not for spying, I told myself, for safety, for documentation. But yes, I watched. I watched them arrive. My father first, dressed like a real estate agent, even on vacation, running his hand along the countertops like he was inspecting the marble's pedigree. Then my mother, directing luggage placement like a general, displeased with the hydrangeas I'd arranged, of course, rearranged them within 5 minutes of entering. James arrived next. Wife, kids, matching luggage, matching size. Amanda came last, her husband a human LinkedIn profile carrying 2 iPads and 1 expression. Cousins, aunts, uncles, the whole curated collection, walking through my home like it was a rental, because to them it was. Then I saw it. The family photo display. Frames from ski trips, birthdays, weddings, photos I'd taken or been cropped out of. One showed all 5 of us, parents and siblings, smiling, until my mother subtly slid that one behind another frame. My image once again edited out. That night, through the camera feed, I watched them eat dinner, drink wine, talk about achievements, Amanda's new interior designer, James's promotion, a cousin's kid getting into Yale. Not one mention of me, until Zoe, my cousin now a teenager, unfiltered in a way only the ignored are. What happened to Stephanie? She asked, looking up from her plate. She used to take the best pictures at Christmas. A silence so sharp you could slice brie with it. That's not an appropriate dinner topic, my mother said. She was always nice to me, Zoe added. She made her choices, my father said. That was the verdict, the closing statement. I had chosen exile, as if they'd simply offered me a different seat and I'd opted for the one outside. I turned off the monitor. Tomorrow I would stop watching from the shadows. Tomorrow I would walk through that door, not as a daughter, not as a memory, but as the woman who owned the house. There's a strange sort of power in choosing your entrance. After a decade of tiptoeing around family shadows, I was finally walking through the front door, not out of obligation, but because I could. I chose my outfit the way one might choose armour, a sleek black dress, understated but expensive, paired with delicate gold earrings that caught the light just enough. My hair was pulled back in a low ponytail, clean controlled. Every detail said, I belong here, because I do. The day was warm, with just enough breeze to keep the flies off the tuna tartare my housekeeper had prepared before discreetly disappearing. It was noon prime family lunch on the deck time. I waited until the sound of clinking glasses and casual laughter peaked. Then I walked in. The click of my heels echoed across the hardwood floors. Silence hit like a vacuum. 12 faces turned toward me. James froze mid-sentence. Amanda's wineglass hovered in the air. My mother's hand clutched a napkin like a lifeline. My father, ever the lawyer, rose halfway out of his seat with all the grace of a man realizing he had made a very serious miscalculation. Then the real show began. The wineglass slipped from my mother's hand and shattered on the deck. Amanda rose, eyes narrowing, voice sharp. What are you doing here? How did you even get in? I didn't blink. I live here, I said calmly. This is my house. No dramatic music, no courtroom gasp, just air sucked out of the space, like the beach had suddenly gone still. That's impossible, my father said slowly. We rented this property through Hampton Luxury Estates. Yes, I replied. You did. They manage this house, my house. When I'm travelling, I stepped fully onto the deck. No invitation needed. The sun hit my shoulders and I tilted my chin, soaking in the warmth like armour. My mother finally sat down too slowly. You own this house? Yes. There was a weight behind that one word, a decade's worth of disbelief turned proof. And then something wonderful happened. Zoe, sweet, sharp-eyed Zoe, leapt up from her chair and ran straight into my arms. Stephanie, she cried. I knew you'd come back someday. Her hug was real, no hesitation, no calculated pause. It caught me off guard and unravelled the composure I'd spent all morning buttoning up. Look at you, I managed, blinking fast. So tall. She pulled back, grinning. I follow your photography page. You shot that waterfall in Vermont, right, and the black and white staircase series. My heart twisted. You have a good eye, I said. The adult stayed frozen, unsure of the rules of reintroducing the family pariah. Then Aunt Dorothy, my mother's youngest sister, always the least filtered, stood and kissed my cheek. Stephanie, she said gently, you look wonderful. I smiled, a little shaky, but grateful. Uncle Paul followed with a firm handshake. A cousin waved awkwardly, like we were all playing charades with people we hadn't seen since the pilot episode. Amanda stayed by her husband's side, arms crossed so tight it looked painful. James moved forward with a conflicted expression that hovered in somewhere between admiration and guilt. He gave me a brief hug, stiff but there. You look great, Steph, he murmured. I stepped back and took a breath. Well, I said, addressing the full table. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I hope you're enjoying your stay. Polite murmurs followed. Someone offered me a chair. My mother flinched almost imperceptibly when I accepted. I sat. On the deck of the house, they thought they had rented for their private, exclusive, Stephanie-free family reunion, and I joined their lunch. Quirky fact of the day, Octopuses have 3 hearts. 2 pump blood to the gills. The 3rd pumps it to the body. And when they swim, that 3rd heart actually stops. They tire easily because movement costs them love. I get it. Showing up like this cost me too. The meal unfolded like a diplomatic summit. They praised the food, asked about the weather, commented on the view without acknowledging who made that view possible. Zoe, bless her, kept asking about my work. "You really do this full time?" she asked, wide-eyed. "You're like successful. I run a company," I said. "Coastal Vision Photography. We specialise in architectural and real estate imagery." My father finally broke the professional distance. "Real estate photography?" he asked, his tone edging into disbelief. "That's how you afford all this?" "Partly," I replied evenly. "Coastal Vision has done well. We work with high-end clients all over the Northeast, some celebrities, business leaders." I sipped my sparkling water. "And this particular house was left to me by a mentor, a woman who believed in my work. She wanted it in the hands of someone who appreciated its beauty." My mother flinched, a small twitch of her jaw, but she said nothing. "How fortunate for you," she murmured. Yes, I agreed, very. Old age wisdom break. In a Japanese proverb it's said, "The nail that sticks out gets hammered down," but there's another version rarely told. Sometimes the nail becomes the foundation. As lunch wore on, the kids got bored and wandered toward the beach. Conversations shifted toward safer ground school updates, summer travel plans, gossip about a cousin's new girlfriend. I listened, nodded when appropriate, didn't overshare. I was polite, gracious, fully present and fully armoured. They couldn't ignore me now, but I wasn't demanding apologies either. I was just there, a fact, an undeniable one. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, I excused myself and walked down to the water. The waves rolled in soft and slow, catching gold in their foam. I wrapped my arms around myself, exhaled and let the wind tangle my hair. Footsteps behind me. I didn't turn. "Your photography," my father said, coming to stand beside me. "I saw some of your work online. After I looked you up. That caught me off guard." "You did," he nodded. "The Sullivan penthouse, the Manning estate. Beautiful shots. Thank you." He shifted his stance. "Impressive, very impressive." He said it like the words cost him something, which, in his world, they probably did. Before I could respond, he turned and walked back toward the house, leaving a single thin crack in the wall that had stood between us for a decade. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just a beginning. That night, long after the clink of dessert plates and the careful orchestration of family togetherness had faded into scattered conversations and yawns, I wandered into the kitchen for a glass of water. The deck lights were off now. The house was quieter than it had been all day, save for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the faint rustling of the sea breeze against the shutters. I wasn't expecting company. But there he was, James, sitting alone at the kitchen table, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass, like someone in a mid-budget lawyer drama. He looked up when I entered, but didn't smile. "Can't sleep?" I asked, grabbing a water bottle from the fridge. He shook his head. "Too many thoughts." "Same." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Join me." I hesitated, then sat. The last time we'd shared a drink, it was over coffee in Midtown, where he'd checked his watch every 6 minutes and told me they just needed time. Now here he was, older, softer in the jawline, dressed in pyjama pants and the kind of t-shirt that gets demoted to sleepwear after a few too many years. He looked tired. "You surprised them," he said finally. "Good." They didn't know about the house, the business, any of it, I figured. He tapped the rim of his glass. "They told everyone you had a breakdown after graduation." I froze. He wasn't looking at me. "Said you couldn't handle the pressure, that you were getting help. The first year they kept the story vague. After that, they just stopped talking about you altogether. And you went along with it," I said, not harshly. Just fact. He didn't flinch. "At first, yeah. I thought maybe you'd be back. Then." I didn't know what to say. It was easier to pretend I disappeared. He finally met my eyes. It was easier for everyone. We sat in silence. It wasn't hostile. It was the kind of quiet that fills the space between two people realizing they could have done better, but didn't. Old age wisdom, most people don't abandon you out of cruelty. They abandon you out of cowardice. I took a sip of water. Why the reunion? Why now? James sighed. You want the PR version or the truth? Try the truth. He rubbed a hand over his face, suddenly looking every one of his 37 years. Dad's company is tanking. Real estate market crashed. 2 big deals fell through. He's keeping up appearances, but they're not doing great. This reunion was a way to save face. Celebrate the anniversary without paying for a full-blown event. I processed that. So this isn't just sentiment. James shook his head. It's strategy. And Dad's health isn't great either. Heart problems. He collapsed at work last month. I leaned back. Is he getting treatment? Yes, but he's refusing to slow down. Won't tell anyone outside the immediate family. He's terrified that showing weakness will sink the company faster. I didn't speak. I was still stuck on the word collapsed. All my life, Harold Walker had seemed bulletproof. A man of ironed shirts, crisp contracts, and perfectly practiced smiles. The idea of him as fragile mortal felt surreal. Before I could respond, Amanda appeared in the doorway. She was barefoot in an absurdly expensive silk robe that still managed to look like a costume. Her expression was neutral. Almost. Family secrets without me? She asked, her tone light but brittle. Just catching up, James said. Want to join? She hesitated, then walked over and took the 3rd chair. We sat like that, the Walker siblings, around my reclaimed kitchen island, the same one I'd installed with my own earnings, my design, my home. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Amanda said, "Your house is beautiful. Thank you. You've done well for yourself." I smiled. I have. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. Must be nice. Having freedom. No expectations. No obligations. I raised an eyebrow. Freedom comes with its own cost. At least you got to build it your way, she said. Her voice wobbled. Some of us followed the plan and still ended up miserable. It wasn't a dig, it was a confession. James and I both looked at her, but she stared straight ahead. Tom's having an affair, she said flatly. Has been for years. Dad knows. He won't say anything because Tom's father is one of his biggest investors. I blinked. Why stay? I asked gently. 3 kids. A prenup that gives me nothing if I leave. No career. No identity beyond Amanda the wife. What would you suggest I do, Steph? I didn't have an answer. Because the truth is, when you've never been allowed to build yourself, starting from scratch feels like a cliff with no bottom. James reached over and squeezed her hand. I realised then that they'd maintained some version of a sibling connection, even when I'd been gone. Shared wounds, silent alliances. Maybe you should start taking pictures again, I said, only half joking. Amanda gave a dry laugh. Last time I touched a camera was the day you left. Remember when we used to sneak into Marta's garden and do fake fashion shoots? I smiled. You made me take 84 photos of you in the same straw hat. It was a good hat. Quirky fact, sea otters hold hands when they sleep to avoid drifting apart. It's not for romance, it's for survival. We didn't hold hands that night, the 3 of us. But we sat there long after the house fell silent, watching each other in the soft kitchen light. Like maybe we weren't so far apart after all. Then, like clockwork, our mother entered. Eleanor Walker, in a silk blouse and cream-coloured trousers, looked every bit the poised hostess despite the late hour. A late-night gathering, she observed, tone unreadable. James and Amanda straightened instinctively like students caught gossiping after class. We were just heading to bed, James said, standing. Amanda followed. I remained seated. My mother crossed the counter and poured herself tea like she hadn't just dissolved an honest moment with her mere presence. She didn't speak, didn't look at me. The moment was over, but something lingered. The knowledge that cracks were forming in the perfect Walker facade, and for the first time, I wasn't the cause. I didn't sleep that night, even after everyone had gone to bed and the house returned to that eerie stillness that only truly large houses know how to hold. My thoughts didn't settle. I lay in the master bedroom, once Lisa's sanctuary, and now technically mine, staring at the ceiling while waves hummed softly beyond the glass. At dawn, I pulled on a sweater and went down to the beach. The sand was still cool from the night. Mist clung to the horizon like breath on a mirror. I wrapped myself tighter in the oversized cardigan I'd stolen from an ex years ago and walked barefoot across the quiet shoreline. And then I heard it. Footsteps behind me, measured, deliberate. I didn't turn. I knew who it was before he spoke. "May I join you?" My father's voice was lower than I remembered. Maybe from the sea air, maybe from age. I nodded without looking at him. He stepped onto the sand beside me, slower than he used to be. The man who once jogged 5 miles before a conference call now winced slightly as he sat down. We stared at the water for a long time. Finally, he said, "Your mother told me about your conversation with James and Amanda." I waited. She didn't tell me everything he added, but enough. He rubbed his hands together, sand sticking to his palms like guilt. I've never been good at admitting mistakes. That made me smile, not bitterly, just honestly. "When you left," he said carefully, "I was sure you'd fail, that you'd come back in a few months, humble, ready to listen, ready to do things the right way. And when I didn't," he sighed, "I didn't know what to do with that. I nearly did fail," I admitted, 12 times, but I didn't." He glanced at me, and for the first time, I saw it something between admiration and grief. The realization that the daughter he had disowned had not only survived, but thrived, and he hadn't witnessed a single moment of it. "You built something," he said. "Impressive work. I saw your portfolio. The Sullivan penthouse, the Manning estate, that lighthouse shoot in Maine. You looked me up." He nodded periodically. "Never told your mother, never reached out, but I checked in, quietly." "Why?" "Because you're my daughter. Old age wisdom time. Even silent fathers grieve the distance they help create." We were both quiet again. The waves rolled in, insistent and timeless. "You always thought security came from structure," I said finally, "from doing things your way. Law school, corporate jobs, marrying well. Structure is what I knew. I needed space, creativity, breath. And I thought it was weakness." I looked at him, really looked. There were lines on his face I hadn't seen before. Not just age worry, strain. The erosion of control. "You said I'd fail, and I was wrong." It wasn't a full apology, but in Walker family terms, it might as well have been a parade. "There's something else," he added. "Amanda. She said you're mentoring Zoe." "She has a good eye," I said. "Reminds me of myself." He nodded. "Her parents want her to study business." "Of course they do." "What do you think she should do?" I asked. He hesitated, looked out at the water again. "I think I've lived long enough to see what happens when you force someone to abandon what they love, and what happens when you don't." I blinked. "For Harold Walker, that was practically a revolution." "Thank you," I said quietly. He stood, brushing sand off his slacks. "You've become a woman I respect," he said, and that's not something I say easily. Then he walked back toward the house, leaving footprints beside mine, not overtaking, not disappearing, just parallel. Quirky fact: flamingos can sleep on one leg and maintain perfect balance. Scientists still don't fully understand how. Sometimes balance isn't about symmetry, it's about what you're willing to let go of. Later that morning, I resumed my routine, calls with my booking team, reviewing client edits, preparing a set of marketing materials for a boutique real estate developer in Soho. Through the window, I saw my family moving around the house, still here, still guests, but the energy had changed. They no longer moved like they owned the space. They moved like people trying not to knock over something fragile. That afternoon, I called a family meeting. Yes, a meeting because walkers respond better to bullet points than feelings. They gathered in the living room. My mother perched on the edge of a chaise lounge, James leaning against the mantel, Amanda flipping her phone face down, already tense. I stood notes in hand, but didn't need them. This reunion was unexpected, I began, for all of us, and now that we're here, I think we need to talk about what comes next. My mother straightened, preparing her rebuttal like a closing argument. I'm not asking for full reconciliation, I continued. Too much has happened. Too much time has passed. Amanda crossed her arms. But I said I am open to building something new, something healthier. What do you mean by healthier? My father asked, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Mutual respect, I replied. Acknowledgement of who we are now. No more erasing, no more pretending. If we're going to have any relationship, it has to be based on reality, not fantasy. And if some of us don't want a relationship, Amanda asked, her eyes steady on mine. That's valid, I said. I'm not asking anyone to fake anything. My mother cleared her throat. What exactly are you proposing, Stephanie? Small steps, holiday phone calls, occasional dinners. A willingness to communicate honestly, and above all, boundaries. James nodded. I'd like that. My father studied me like I was a contract he hadn't read closely enough the first time. You've become quite the negotiator, he said. I learned from the best, I replied. He gave the smallest smile. Your terms are reasonable, he said. I accept. My mother hesitated. Then, finally, she nodded. Amanda didn't speak, but she didn't walk away either. Progress. As the family dispersed, I found Zoe on the deck camera in hand. How would you like to learn more? I asked, sitting beside her. Her eyes lit up. You'd teach me for real, if your parents agree. We can start small. Basics this week. Then maybe Zoom lessons, regular critiques. She bit her lip. They'll say I need to focus on school. I smiled. Then we'll remind them that art and education aren't enemies. She beamed, and I saw it, the spark I'd once had, before anyone tried to snuff it out. This time I'd protect it, even if I had to rewrite the family playbook page by page. That night, I was in the kitchen boiling water for tea when my mother walked in alone without her usual shield of elegance. No pearls, no tablet in hand, just a pale blue cardigan and slippers I'd never seen her wear in public. She moved with the same grace she always had, but there was something else there now, tentative, maybe even tired. She didn't look at me right away, just filled the kettle beside mine. We've been discussing your offer, she said after a moment. Your father and I said nothing. She reached into the cabinet and pulled out a mug. I watched her movements, graceful and precise, and then froze. She handed me a cup of tea prepared exactly the way I'd always liked it as a teenager. No milk, 1 teaspoon of honey, steeped lightly, not boiling hot. You remembered, I murmured, surprised. Her lips tightened slightly. I wasn't always as inattentive as you believed. It was a strange kind of truth, one that tasted bitter even as it offered warmth. She sat down at the small breakfast table, posture still, perfect hands clasped gently on the tablecloth. This is a beautiful home, she said. You've created something remarkable. I had help, I replied. Just not from here. I know. There was no defensiveness, no spin. I thought I was protecting you, she said after a pause. The world, it's not kind to girls who dream too loudly. I thought I could shape your future, make it manageable. I let her speak. Instead, I clipped your wings. I looked down at my tea steam swirling like something ancient trying to escape. You didn't believe in me. No, she said quietly. I didn't. The honesty of it landed like a stone in a still pond. And when you left, she continued, we convinced ourselves you'd come back, that we'd been right, that you just needed to learn a lesson. What lesson? that the world was hard and our way was safe. Old age wisdom time. There's a Japanese saying, the reverse side also has a reverse side, meaning even in what we think is certainty, there's another truth waiting to be seen. I was angry, I said, and scared. I begged you to see me, and when you wouldn't, I left before I could disappear entirely. She nodded. We erased you instead. I blinked. I didn't expect her to say it, much less admit it like that. Her voice was steady, but her hands, those perfectly manicured, never wrong hands, were trembling ever so slightly. I was wrong, she said, and I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. No sweeping violin, no movie script tears. Just two women in a kitchen at the tail end of a very long war, finally acknowledging the ruins. We sipped tea in silence. After a while, she reached across the table and touched my hand. Let's try, she said. Let's try to build something. I didn't promise anything that night, but I didn't pull my hand away either. The final days of the family's visit passed in a strange kind of truce. We didn't fall into old habits. We didn't pretend nothing had happened, but there was a shift, subtle, cautious, like walking on new ice. Amanda softened, slightly. She asked questions about my business, not snide ones, but real ones. At one point, she lingered in my studio, trailing her fingers along the edge of a vintage camera. This was your dream, she said quietly. Yes. Her eyes looked glassy, but she blinked it away before anyone noticed. James was more obvious. He hugged me at random moments, called me sis like we hadn't skipped 10 years of birthdays. He even suggested grabbing dinner next time we were both in the city. Progress. My father maintained a professional distance, but it was warmer now. He asked about my client base, nodded appreciatively when I explained my expansion plan, even offered to connect me with a colleague in luxury construction. I won't interfere, he added, almost sheepishly. Just, if you need a name. That was his version of affection. Zoe, of course, was my shadow. We spent hours reviewing her photos. She had real talent, not just a good eye, but a curiosity about angles and light. One afternoon, she followed me on a client's shoot, just a casual walk through the property. She asked sharp questions and took notes on her phone. At lunch, she whispered, "I wish you were my real sister." I laughed. "You've already got your hands full with your real cousins." Still, she said, "You see things no one else in this family does." I didn't say it, but the truth hummed between us. You do too. On the final morning, we gathered on the driveway. Goodbyes were awkward, as they often are in families still figuring out what to do with each other. James hugged me properly, promised to call. I believed him this time. Amanda offered a measured thank you. "You've built a beautiful life." "You're welcome to visit," I offered. The kids too, they should know their aunt. Something flickered in her face, regret maybe, or envy, but she nodded. My mother hugged me, a full hug, brief but real. "We'll talk soon," she said. "Yes," I replied, "we will." My father was last. He shook my hand, then pulled me into a one-armed embrace that felt strangely natural. "I'm proud of what you've built," he said. "I should have told you that sooner. You still can." He smiled, and then they were gone. One car after another pulled out of the driveway, the luxury SUVs and carefully packed trunks disappearing into the horizon like a slow parade. Zoe was last. She clutched a small folder, a packet I'd prepared just for her. Photography basics, notes, my direct contact information. Email me anytime, I told her. Photos, questions, life stuff. She hugged me like a niece who meant it. Fierce, grateful. "I will," she said, "every week." And I believed her. When the last engine faded and the wind reclaimed the quiet, I walked back into my house. It was silent again, mine again, but something had changed. The weight I'd been carrying, the ache of estrangement, the bitterness of being forgotten had lifted. Not completely, but enough. I no longer felt like a ghost in my own story. I felt like the author. Quirky fact for the road. Certain trees only grow stronger after forest fires. The heat cracks their seeds open. Turns out people are a lot like that too. In the weeks after they left, I kept waiting for the emotional whiplash to kick in. Some sort of post-confrontation crash, like maybe I'd wake up one morning full of regret for not slamming the door in their faces, or conversely full of guilt for not letting them back in more easily. But instead, what I felt was unsteady, weirdly steady, not euphoric, not bitter, just grounded like a storm had passed and left everything a little damp, a little rearranged, but still standing. I went back to work, answered emails, finalised edits, flew to Boston for a luxury condo shoot, had dinner with my assistant, who commented that I seemed lighter, like I'd finally taken off a backpack I didn't realise I'd been carrying. And I had. Because the truth is, when you live under someone else's expectations long enough, you forget what it's like to stand up straight. I began mentoring Zoe officially. We met weekly via Zoom. She emailed me photos, most of which were too dark or too overexposed, but she had an instinct I could work with. I gave her small assignments, encouraged her to start a private portfolio. Her excitement was pure unfiltered, like mine had been before anyone tried to monetize it or shape it into something digestible for dinner parties. James kept in touch too. We met for lunch in the city a few weeks later, just the two of us, no kids, no pretense. He asked questions about my work, really listened when I answered. At one point, he leaned back and said, "You know, I think I was jealous of you." I raised an eyebrow. "You had the guts to walk away," he said. "I never did." Old age wisdom, the hardest chains to break are the ones you pretended were jewellery. Amanda didn't call. But she did send an email, short, awkward, but honest. "I've been thinking about what you said, about rebuilding on new terms. I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm not against trying." I replied 2 days later. "Trying is enough. Let me know when you're ready." It wasn't reconciliation. It was a placeholder, a door left slightly ajar. And sometimes that's the most you can ask for. 3 months after the reunion, I got an unexpected email from my father. Subject line, project proposal. At first I thought it was spam, but then I opened it and saw the words I never expected from Harold Walker. "We're rebranding, trying to attract new investors, considering a full visual overhaul of the company's image. Would you be interested in handling the photography?" Below that was a draft proposal, a generous compensation offer, and more surprising, a line that read, "Creative direction and final selections at your discretion." I stared at the screen. For 10 years I'd been an outcast, a cautionary tale, a dinner conversation shutdown. Now I was being offered a seat at the table, not as a prodigal daughter, but as a respected professional. I called him. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Yes, I want the best, and you're the best." That single sentence nearly knocked me off my stool. "I'll send over my standard contract," I said, keeping my voice even. "Agreed," he replied. He didn't haggle, didn't ask for a family discount, just said, "We'll follow your lead." And they did. Over the next several weeks, I shot their new campaign, offices, boardrooms, team portraits. I worked with their marketing director, styled shots for brochures and investor decks. I even brought Zoe on set for a few of the lighter days, told her to observe, take behind-the-scenes stills, ask questions. My father watched her with an expression I couldn't quite place, something between nostalgia and realization. "She's good," he said one afternoon as Zoe crouched to catch a low-angle frame of a glass conference table. "She reminds me of someone I used to know." He nodded, then added, "Maybe this time we'll get it right." Thanksgiving approached. I debated what to do. For years, I'd avoided the holiday altogether, booked travel shoots, volunteered for work, scheduled elaborate me days that involved overpriced candles and movies with complicated female protagonists. But this year, I felt something different, not obligation, but maybe desire. I wanted to host, not for tradition's sake, but on my own terms. So I sent the invitations, not just to family, but to my chosen people, Garrett, now semi-retired and somehow still grumpy, my assistant Danny and her girlfriend, Lisa's son Michael, who had finally thawed toward me after learning I wasn't trying to replace his mother. James RSVP'd first. Wouldn't miss it. Amanda said she'd try. No promises. But thank you. My parents sent a joint response. We accept your invitation. Let us know what to bring. Progress. Quirky fact turkeys can recognise faces. They can even develop preferences. If you feed them often enough, they'll follow you around like oversized judgmental ducks. Thanksgiving arrived crisp and golden. I decorated the house with eucalyptus branches and white candles. No autumn leaf garlands. No corny signs that said, "Bless this mess." Just clean beauty and lots of carbs. People came. Laughter filled the rooms. Zoe arrived early and helped plate desserts. My mother helped her adjust the settings on her camera. My father talked business with Michael. James played board games with Zoe and Danny's nephew. Amanda came late, sat quietly, and left early. But she came, and that meant something. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As the sun set over the water and the dishes were stacked by the sink, I stepped outside alone. The ocean glittered. The air was cool and damp. I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat on the steps, breathing it all in. 10 years ago, I'd left with $800 a camera and the memory of people who thought love meant control. Now I had a life I built. A family, not just the one I was born into, but the one I chose. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. I was just home. The day after Thanksgiving, the house was quieter in that post-gathering way where you can still smell pie and someone's cologne lingering in the air. The coffee pot was half full, the firewood was down to the last few logs, and I was barefoot in the kitchen reheating stuffing in the oven because I'm a firm believer that it's better the next day. Zoe wandered in, wrapped in a hoodie that swallowed her frame camera hanging around her neck like a lucky charm. "Did you sleep?" I asked, sliding the tray into the oven. She shrugged. "Too many thoughts." "You and me both." She leaned against the counter. "Do you ever still feel like they're waiting for you to mess up?" I turned, surprised by the question. "All the time," she nodded. "Mum says photography is a hobby, that I should focus on something practical, something that'll support a family someday." I smiled gently. "That sounds familiar." Quirky fact. In medieval times, cats were often accused of witchcraft simply for doing things like staring too long or appearing during storms. Turns out people are very suspicious of quiet observation, especially when it's feminine. You know, I said you can be practical and passionate. The two aren't enemies, but they act like it's either or. It's not. You're allowed to build a life that uses both sides of your brain. She chewed her lip. "I just want to make things that matter." "You already do," I said, tapping her camera. "You just need someone to believe in that early enough that you don't spend 10 years trying to undo the damage." She blinked rapidly. "Thanks for everything." I squeezed her shoulder. "You're not alone in this. I've got you." Later that afternoon, James found me on the back deck. He held 2 mugs coffee for him, tea for me, somehow still remembering the difference. "I talked to Dad," he said, handing me the mug, "about the rebranding project." Let me guess, he's pretending he thought of it first. He smirked. He's actually impressed. I think you surprised him. I think I unsettle him. Probably both. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun do its slow, deliberate drop toward the horizon. He told me something else James said. Said you reminded him of Lisa, that she had the same stubborn elegance. I laughed. He means I make him uncomfortable and wear expensive shoes, more or less. James shifted. I think he's starting to get it, though. What you built, why you had to leave. I don't need him to get it, I said. But I guess it's nice if he does. Old age wisdom of the day, sometimes the best healing isn't being proven right. It's simply being seen finally, without having to shout. James leaned back. Do you ever think about moving on from it completely? The whole family stuff. I sipped my tea. I used to, but now I think I'd rather rewrite it than delete it. Later that evening, Amanda approached me while I was tidying the studio. She hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable. "Hey," I said, dusting off a lens. "This room looks like you." I smiled. "What does that mean?" "It's honest, a little chaotic, but warm." "Thanks," I said, unsure if it was a compliment. She stepped inside and picked up a framed print, a black and white photo of an old man sitting on a porch light slicing across his face. "You took this?" "Yeah, in Georgia. He told me a story about his wife that broke my heart." Amanda traced the edge of the frame. "I think I'm jealous of you." That surprised me. Why? "You found something that belongs to you, something no one can take away. You could too, you know. Maybe not photography, but something." She scoffed. "I wouldn't even know where to start." "You start by remembering who you were before they told you who to be." She looked at me, then eyes shinier than usual. Sometimes I think I forgot. I set the lens down. "Then let's find her." The next morning, Amanda asked Zoe if she wanted to stay with me for a weekend in the city over winter break. "You can go to the MoMA," she said, "or the Met, or whatever photographers do." Zoe lit up like a sunrise. "Can I?" Amanda nodded. "If Stephanie's okay with it." "I'd love that," I said. "We'll have a whole weekend of creativity and overpriced sandwiches." That afternoon, Zoe made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with too much jelly and declared it her artist fuel. Amanda rolled her eyes but didn't stop her. Small wins. A week later, I got an envelope in the mail. It was from my mother. Inside was a single page handwritten in the kind of cursive that belonged to debutante balls and stern thank you notes. "Dear Stephanie, I came across this the other day while cleaning out the hall closet. It was behind the boxes of holiday decorations. I thought it had been lost years ago. Tucked inside was a photograph, faded but unmistakable. It was me, age 12, kneeling in the garden with my first camera, mouth open in mid-laugh. Unaware the lens was pointed at me. You always did see the world differently. I'm sorry I didn't see you clearly until now. Love, Mom. I stared at the photo for a long time, not because it changed everything, but because it didn't have to. Sometimes a crack is enough for light to get in. That night I sat on the beach alone. No phone, no playlist, just the ocean and me like old friends sitting in silence. I thought about how much had changed in a single year, how I'd gone from ghost to homeowner, from footnote to mentor. I thought about Lisa, about the way she'd seen something in me before I did. I thought about Zoe and how the next generation deserves better models. I thought about how weird and wonderful it is to look your past in the face and not flinch. Quirky fact: jellyfish have survived 5 mass extinctions without hearts or brains. So maybe survival doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes it looks like quiet evenings and second chances. Sometimes it looks like choosing to stay on your terms. I used to think survival meant getting as far away as possible from the pain, from the people who caused it, from the parts of yourself that still wanted to be loved by them. But turns out, survival is quieter than that. It's waking up in a house you once couldn't imagine affording, drinking coffee from your favourite chipped mug, picking out photos with a teenager who thinks you're the coolest person alive just because you believed in her before anyone else did. And on some days, days like today, it's answering a phone call from your mother and not flinching when her name pops up on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," she says now, like we hadn't lost a decade somewhere in the middle. "I wanted to talk to you about Christmas." I blink, sitting cross-legged on the guest house floor, camera parts spread around me like a tech autopsy. "Christmas. We'd like to host," she says, "but we'd like you to be there, if you're open to it." I pause more out of habit than resistance. "We'll understand, if not," she adds quickly, the kind of self-protective footnote she never used to need. "But we'd like to try." I take a breath. "Okay," I say, "let's try." When I arrive at their home, my childhood home on Christmas Eve, everything looks familiar and completely foreign at the same time. The same hedges, same front door wreath, same perfectly wrapped gifts in matching paper lined under the tree. But the energy is different. Not soft exactly, but aware, less practiced. My father greets me first. His handshake turns into a hug, so awkward it makes me laugh. I wasn't sure if you'd actually come, he admits. I wasn't sure either, I say honestly. Amanda opens the door for me like I'm a guest, then pulls me into a hug like I'm not. I got Zoe a new lens for Christmas, she whispers. Don't tell her. I approve. James is already in the kitchen wearing an apron and pretending he can cook. His kids run past my legs shouting about cookies and reindeer. One of them stops and looks up. You're the picture aunt, right? I grin. That's me. Old age wisdom, the best way to rewrite a story is to live the next chapter out loud. We eat dinner around the long oak table that once bore the weight of 100 expectations. This time, the food is delicious, the conversation gentler. No one brings up politics. No one corrects Zoe when she says she wants to apply to art school. And no one erases me. Later, as we open presents, my mother hands me a small box. I saw this and thought of you, she says, voice quiet. Inside is a vintage camera charm, delicate, silver. The kind of thing you'd find in a second-hand shop if the universe was feeling sentimental. It's lovely, I say. It's overdue, she replies. After dinner, I step outside to clear my head. The air is cold. My breath curls in front of me like a slow exhale of everything I never said. Footsteps crunch behind me. This time it's Amanda. You okay? She asks, joining me. Yeah, just taking it in. She folds her arms. Do you ever feel like this is all happening to someone else? All the time? I envy you, she says after a beat. Not just the house or the career or even the peace. I envy that you figured out who you were without needing anyone else to confirm it. You still can. She looks away. It feels too late. It's not. I wouldn't even know where to start. Start small, I say. Start by taking a walk without your phone. By writing a list of things you actually enjoy. By saying no once a week. She's quiet. Then, would it be weird if I came to stay at the beach house for a weekend alone? Not weird at all, I say. Actually, I think it'd be good for you. Do you have wine there? I have wine silence and the kind of Wi-Fi that forces you to be present. She smiles. Sold. That weekend in January, Amanda comes. She doesn't bring the kids. She doesn't bring Tom. She shows up with a suitcase, a messy ponytail and no makeup for the first time since age 14. She walks into the guest house, turns in a slow circle and says, "It feels safe here." I nod. It is. We don't talk much that first night. We eat pasta, drink wine, and she falls asleep on the couch at 9 p.m. I throw a blanket over her and let her be. The next morning, she wakes up before me and is already outside, photographing the beach on her phone. You're early, I say, stepping out with coffee. I had a weird dream, she says. I was running, but not from anything, just towards something I couldn't see yet. I nod. That sounds about right. We walk the shoreline in silence, just two sisters in borrowed coats trying to remember who they were before they learned to perform. Quirky fact, starfish can regenerate lost limbs, but it takes time and they're vulnerable while healing. Humans, I think, are exactly the same. When Amanda leaves, she hugs me for a full 10 seconds. I still don't know what I'm doing, she whispers. No one does, I whisper back, but I'm trying. That's enough. Later that week, I find a package at my door. It's from her, inside a framed photo, one she must have taken on the beach. It's blurry, imperfect, totally off-center. And it's beautiful. Beneath it, a note. For the sister I never really knew, thank you for waiting. I hang it in the studio right above my desk. A reminder that some stories don't need perfect endings, just honest ones. Spring came early that year, the kind of early that makes you suspicious, like you expect snow to come crashing back through the window just when you start switching out your sweaters. But the warmth stuck around, and with it came something else clarity. Not the dramatic movie ending kind, the slow, grounded kind, the kind that wraps itself around your morning coffee and lingers in the corners of your studio when the light hits just right. Coastal Vision Photography was busier than ever. We'd picked up a contract with a boutique hotel chain expanding along the East Coast. Zoe started shadowing me on local shoots. She asked real questions now about contracts' lighting ratios, even how to handle nightmare clients with grace. Answer smile politely and document everything. And then, one afternoon, while editing a set of shots from a newly restored brownstone in Brooklyn, I got another email from my father. We're looking at expanding the rebranding project into the commercial side. More team portraits, possibly video. Would your firm be interested? My firm, not you, not your little side hustle. My firm, I replied. Yes, but I'd need to bring in a partner for the video portion. I'd still oversee all creative direction. He responded within the hour. Agreed, let's move forward. Progress. Old age wisdom, the relationships we rebuild as adults carry more weight than the ones we inherited. Not because they're bigger, but because they're chosen. A few weeks later, I found myself standing in the same conference room I'd once been told I didn't belong in. Harold Walker and Associates had upgraded their office space, but the aesthetic was the same glass marble confidence. Only this time, the confidence was mine too. I brought my assistant Danny to help set up the lighting rig. My father watched us work from the corner of the room, arms crossed, but relaxed. Your team is efficient, he commented. They're excellent, I replied, adjusting a softbox. I don't hire anyone I wouldn't trust with my reputation. He nodded like he was impressed, but didn't want to admit it out loud. As we worked, I noticed James popping in and out of meetings. At one point, he passed by, caught my eye, and gave me a quick thumbs up before disappearing again. Amanda didn't come that day, but she sent me a text later. Tom and I are separating. I finally said it out loud. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I'm proud of you, she replied. I didn't know I could be scared and certain at the same time. That's usually how you know it's right. Later that evening, after the shoot wrapped, I lingered behind to pack up the last of the gear. My father stood by the window, staring out at the city skyline like it was a chessboard. I always thought you'd come back, he said suddenly. Not just to the family, but to the business. Eventually, I looked up. This isn't coming back. This is building something new. He nodded. Yes, it is. You wanted an heir, I said, but you didn't think I could be one without playing by your rules. I see that now. We stood there, two professionals in the shell of an old power dynamic, surrounded by light stands and quiet admissions. Quirky fact geese fly in a V formation because it's easier to maintain momentum together, but the lead goose takes the brunt of the wind. They rotate positions so no one burns out. Maybe families should learn from geese. That weekend, Zoe and I held our first student showcase. It was small, just friends, family, and a few art school contacts I bribed with wine and charcuterie, but it mattered. Zoe printed 5 of her best photos, all black and white. Sharp, emotional, full of mood. Amanda came. She wore jeans, minimal makeup, hair up in a messy bun. She stood in front of one of Zoe's prints, a photo of an older woman sitting in profile hands, folded in her lap, and didn't speak for a full minute. She looks like Mom, Amanda said softly. Zoe joined us. I didn't mean to, but yeah, she kind of does. Amanda looked at me. She has your eye, she said, and your spine. Zoe beamed. Is that a compliment? Amanda smiled. For once, yeah. After the showcase, we went back to my house for tea and leftovers. Amanda and Zoe took over the kitchen. James joined us later with his kids, and for a moment, it almost looked like the kind of family gathering we'd once tried so hard to fake. Only this one wasn't rehearsed. It was messy, casual, real. And mine. Later that night, I stood out on the deck alone. The moonlight stretched across the water like it was reaching for something. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who left with $800 and a camera and a refusal to disappear quietly. I thought about Lisa, about Garrett, about the quiet mentors who saw me long before I saw myself. I thought about the version of family we were building, not perfect, not polished, but rooted in something honest. I thought about Zoe, her talent, her questions, her absolute refusal to shrink. And I thought about how far we'd all come. A few days after the showcase, I found myself in a neighbourhood cafe in the West Village waiting for someone I hadn't seen in years. Lisa's son, Michael. He'd emailed a week earlier. I'm going to be in New York for a few days. Could we talk? I agreed partly out of curiosity, partly out of guilt. The last time we saw each other was at Lisa's funeral, where he barely acknowledged me. Understandable. It wasn't easy to process that your mother had left her beach house to someone who wasn't related by blood or legacy. He walked in right on time. Dark blazer, no tie. The kind of man who kept his emotions behind bulletproof glass. Stephanie, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Michael. We stared at each other for a beat. Then he sighed. I was angry, he said, for a long time. I know. I thought she gave you the house because she didn't trust us, that it was punishment for us not appreciating it the way she did. I stayed quiet. But recently, I looked up your work. That caught me off guard. You're good, he said, like it surprised him to admit it. I mean, really good. Thank you. And she saw it. Before any of us did. Before even you, probably. I nodded. She gave me more than a house. She gave me direction, confidence. She believed in me when no one else did. He tapped his fingers on the table. I think I hated you for not being family. And now, I see that you were the only one who felt like family to her in the end. Old age wisdom, sometimes blood ties, are just location-based coincidences. Family is about recognition, not relation. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a small box. She wanted you to have this. We found it when we were clearing out the safe deposit box. It was labelled Stephanie. I opened it slowly. Inside was a silver key, worn, with a small tag that read Studio 1982. She started her publishing company in a converted garage, he said. That's the key to it. I closed my hand around it. Thank you. She'd be proud of you. That landed in a soft place I didn't know still existed. We talked for a while after that about Lisa, about family, about how strange it is to grieve someone twice once when they die, and again when you realise how little you knew them. Before he left, he said, if you ever want to partner on something foundation mentorship program, anything let me know. I think she'd like that. I nodded. I think she would too. Back at the beach house, I stared at the key for a long time. Then I opened a new notebook and wrote at the top, Montgomery Initiative Vision Access Mentorship, a seed of something bigger. Something for girls like me, and like Zoe, and like whoever's watching from the sidelines, wondering if they're allowed to try. Spring turned into summer. The ocean warmed, the bookings increased, and the house was full again, this time not with ghosts, with people. Zoe stayed for 2 weeks helping with shoots and learning how to manage tricky clients and temperamental light meters. James visited on weekends with his kids, who started calling me Aunt Steph without hesitation. Amanda came alone one Friday, sat on the porch with me, and showed me the beginnings of her own photography blog. I don't know what I'm doing, she said. You're doing it, I replied. One night, the three of us, me, Amanda and James, sat around the fire pit, drinking wine and eating s'mores like teenagers pretending to be adults. Remember that 4th of July when Amanda set Dad's dock chair on fire? James said. It was a sparkler, Amanda protested. You doused it in lighter fluid. Because it looked dull. We laughed until our faces hurt. It was strange. Not in a bad way. In the way that only happens when the past is no longer heavier than the present. Quirky fact kangaroos can't walk backwards. Their anatomy doesn't allow it. Forward is the only option. Families should take notes. One morning, while editing Zoe's latest batch of images, I realised something. I wasn't waiting for approval anymore. Not from my parents, not from my siblings, not from the people who once whispered that I was too sensitive, too soft, too artistic for the real world. I had my proof, not in awards or client lists or magazine spreads, but in the quiet, in how my house felt when it was full of people who chose to be there, in the way my camera fit in my hand like a promise kept, in the steady way my heart beat when I picked up the phone and heard my mother say, "I saw your new work. It's beautiful." I didn't flinch anymore. That was the proof. Later that summer, Zoe and I planned a small exhibition. Her work, my space, a soft launch of the Montgomery Initiative. We invited friends, family, mentors, students. Amanda brought cookies. James brought his wife and kids. Even my father wore sneakers for the first time in recorded history. People came. They asked Zoe about her process. They asked me about mentorship. They lingered over her photo of a grandmother's hands and asked questions like, "How did you know to frame it that way?" And she said, without hesitation, because I was taught to notice the things most people overlook, I stepped outside for air. My mother followed. "She's gifted," she said. "She is." "You were too," she added. "We just didn't know how to handle it." I know. I wish we'd done better. I looked at her. "You're doing better now." We stood in silence, watching through the window as Zoe pointed to one of her photos and explained lighting ratios like a pro. "She's going to change lives," my mother said. I smiled. She already has. Late summer evenings in the Hamptons carry a strange kind of nostalgia, like the air itself remembers every whispered confession, every clink of wine glasses, every kiss that lingered too long on the porch steps. That August the beach house didn't feel like just my home anymore. It felt like a place where healing happened on accident. One weekend, I invited a few industry friends over other photographers, designers, even a gallery curator who'd once turned me down for a show with a kindly worded, "Not quite what we're looking for." We joked about it now over grilled peaches and sparkling water on the deck. But somewhere between the joking and the laughter, a new idea took root. A residency. A place where creatives could come to reset, recharge, reimagine their next move. A place like this. I mentioned it out loud and was met with immediate enthusiasm. I'd fund that, said Marco, a fashion photographer who once slept in his car between weddings. I'd apply, said Rachel, a graphic designer who hadn't taken a vacation in 5 years. Zoe, ever curious, said, "Could I help with the logo?" I blinked. "You want to design it?" She nodded. "I want to try." So we tried, and within a week, the Driftwood Sessions was born. A creative retreat and mentorship residency for women in visual arts. 10 applicants, 1 week, every season. Room, board, quiet. No expectations, just a space to breathe. Old age wisdom, the best gift you can give someone, isn't advice. It's time to hear their own voice. We announced it on social media soft launch style. The post blew up in ways I didn't expect. Hundreds of shares, dozens of messages, emails from women in their 20s, 30s, even 60s. I thought I missed my chance. I've been stuck for years. I need this. It felt right and terrifying. Which, academically speaking, is the exact emotional overlap between fear and growth. Amanda helped with the applications. James connected us with a non-profit that sponsored first-time creatives. My mother, yes, Eleanor Walker herself, donated enough to cover 3 full scholarships. "I want this to matter," she said, writing the check with the poise of a woman used to hosting charity galas, but with eyes that finally saw what those galas never quite reached. And my father, he visited the house a week before our first cohort arrived, walked through the guest rooms, the kitchen, the newly reorganised art supply cabinet. He stood in the studio for a long time, running his hand along a row of mounted prints like he was trying to memorise them. "You've created something rare," he said, finally. "Something meaningful." I hope so. You should be proud. I am. And for once, that sentence didn't land like a performance. It landed like the truth. When the first Driftwood session started, the house transformed. 10 women arrived with wide eyes and too much luggage. Some had been published, some had never shown their work publicly, one had just left a 10-year marriage and hadn't picked up a camera in 6 months. But by the second night, something cracked open. It always does. Laughter over burnt toast, tears in the studio at midnight, confessions that hung in the air like salt, painful but cleansing. I hosted the opening dinner outside. Long table, twinkle lights, music low and jazzy. We went around introducing ourselves, not just with names, but with what we hoped to find here. I want to remember why I started. I want to stop apologising for my work. I want to stop asking if I'm good enough. We toasted with lemonade and cheap wine. And for once, no one tried to sound impressive. They just sounded real. The next morning, I found a note taped to my door. Thank you. This already feels like home. M. Quirky fact, octopuses have 3 hearts, and when they swim, 2 of them stop beating, which is maybe why they prefer crawling. It's gentler on the system. Sometimes moving slowly is survival. By midweek, the house was alive with the sounds of creation. Film reels clicking, laughter echoing, shutter releases like punctuation marks on conversations about memory and motherhood and imposter syndrome. Zoe shadowed me for every group critique. She didn't speak much, just listened until Thursday night. We were reviewing prints in the main room. Margot, a quiet woman in her 40s, presented a set of photos she'd taken of herself in motion, blurred, chaotic, messy. I wanted to show what grief feels like, she explained. Everyone nodded, but it was Zoe who raised her hand. I think they're brilliant, she said, cheeks flushed, because they're not trying to fix the feeling, they just show it. That takes guts. Margot teared up. Zoe looked shocked, and I looked at her with something that felt very much like awe. She had arrived. By the time the week ended, no one wanted to leave. One participant slipped me a note. This place changed how I see myself. Thank you for making space when no one else did. I slipped it into the drawer of my desk, next to the deed, next to Lisa's letter, next to the vintage camera charm my mother gave me that Christmas. On the last night, we stood on the beach, barefoot, wind in our hair, cameras hanging from our necks like second hearts. We took a group photo. One of the participants set the timer and sprinted back, laughing so hard she almost fell over. The shutter clicked, and there we were. Captured, seen, proof that we had for 1 week truly lived. Not just worked, not just survived, lived. After they left, the silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of memory, of promise, of 10 stories set loose in the world, told better now, told braver. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the porch, watched the tide roll in, and I whispered thank you to Lisa, to myself, to every woman who said yes to her own story, even when the world said no. Autumn crept in quietly, tucking its chill into the corners of my mornings and draping the beach in a softer shade of blue, the kind of season that makes you nostalgic for moments still happening. Driftwood Sessions was already planning its winter cohort. Applications doubled. We had to turn people away, not for lack of talent, but simply because there wasn't enough space yet. James suggested we expand the programme, open a second location. You've got the brand. The waitlist proves it. He wasn't wrong. But something in me resisted growing too fast. Maybe it was the way this house breathed with just the right number of people inside. Maybe it was because I knew deep down that part of its magic came from its limits. Old age wisdom, not everything that flourishes needs to scale. Some things are meant to stay small and sacred. I told him we'd revisit the idea in the spring. For now, I wanted to sit with the success, not chase it. And maybe, just maybe, that was my biggest growth yet. Thanksgiving came. my choice. I sent invitations with soft edges, come if you can, stay only as long as you want, no pressure, no performances. Amanda came with her kids looking lighter than I'd ever seen her. She brought a store-bought pie and didn't apologise once. James arrived with his partner, yes, a new one, and a side dish he forgot in the car. We didn't let him live it down. My mother wore jeans for the first time in my lifetime memory. My father wore an apron and basted the turkey like it was a court case he planned to win. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't pretend the cracks weren't there. But we passed the gravy without tension. That in itself was a kind of miracle. Zoe helped me set the table. I let her pick the playlist, all instrumental jazz and moody acoustics. She'd grown taller, smarter, more certain of her place in the world. She called me Steph. Now, not out of defiance, but out of comfort. Later, she pulled me aside and whispered, I want to start my own blog, like yours, but for young photographers. I didn't hesitate. Do it. And let me be your first subscriber. After dinner, as the sun slipped behind the ocean, I took a walk alone along the shoreline. My feet pressed into the cold sand, and the wind tangled my hair, and everything around me felt suspended between endings and beginnings. And I realised this was the first holiday where I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. I belonged here fully, not because my family had finally come around, not because the business had succeeded, but because I'd stayed long enough, strong enough to build something worth belonging to. I remembered something Lisa once told me on that same stretch of beach years ago. It's never about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. I hadn't understood it at the time. Now I did. A few days later, I received a letter, handwritten, from my mother. Not a card, not a formality. A letter, Stephanie. I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately, not just in the financial sense, but in the emotional one. What we leave behind in the people we love. What echoes after we're gone. You've created something beautiful. Not just a business or a house or a brand, but a space where people can rediscover themselves. I wish I'd seen it sooner, but I'm grateful I see it now. Love, Eleanor. It was the closest thing to a full apology she'd ever offer, and it was enough. Quirky fact jellyfish have no brain, no heart, no bones, but they've been thriving for over 500 million years. Survival doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it looks like persistence. New Year's came and went. I stood on the balcony with a glass of sparkling cider, surrounded by people I'd once feared I'd never speak to again. We counted down, and when the clock struck midnight, I closed my eyes. I didn't make a resolution, just a quiet promise that I'd keep choosing myself, that I'd keep the door open, but never let it swing so wide that I vanished again. Now, if you're still here with me, listening, maybe even sitting in the dark with a cup of tea or a hand over your heart, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship on your terms? Not the terms handed to you, not the terms expected of you, but something new, something slower, messier, more real. Because I did. And I can tell you this, it doesn't always end in hugs and happily ever afters. But it can end in peace. And sometimes, peace is the most radical ending of all. When I left home at 20, all I had was a camera, $800, and a stubborn belief that I could build something better. What I didn't know then was that leaving wasn't the end. It was the start of becoming someone I could actually live with. 10 years later, I opened the door to the same people who had shut it on me, not because I needed their validation, but because I had built a life strong enough to invite them in without losing myself. The beach house, once a symbol of freedom, became the center of something deeper, healing, mentorship, reconnection. I didn't get the storybook reconciliation. I got something quieter and more meaningful, a mother who remembered how I took my tea, a father who shook my hand and meant it, a sister who admitted she was lost, a brother who finally saw me as an equal. And Zoe, a new legacy, A reminder that believing in someone early can change everything. I don't know what your version of the beach house is. Maybe it's a studio apartment, a blog no one reads yet, a moment of silence after years of shouting. Whatever it is, I hope you hold on to it. And I hope you remember, boundaries aren't walls. They're doors that only open from the inside. Thank you for walking through mine